Okay, good evening. We make sure the tape recorder's on. So, good evening, everybody. Welcome. First and foremost, can we thank you all for being willing to change the meeting to the 22nd. Next week's a crazy week. DPS is on spring break. It's Holy Thursday. It's the night before Passover, right? I mean, it's like crazy. So,
Good Friday.
Good Friday. So, I appreciate all of you guys doing that. We'll try to be as expedient as possible. Since we've got a lot of new people in the back of us, can we do a quick, very quick, hello, how are you? Who the heck are you? Tim, you're off. It's to the races.
Good evening, I'm Tim Sandos with the North Denver Cornerstone Collaborative.
Good evening, Michael Long with Riverside Cemetery.
Vernon Hill, JJJ Properties, Globeville.
Nancy Grandis-Jones, JJJ Properties, Globeville Civic Partners.
Juan Veloz, el cual representa el IRI Swansea.
Juan Veloz, representing the Rio of Swansea.
Julia Spalding-Fiegels, representing Denver Museum of Nature and Science.
Tracy Wild, Rhino Art District.
Paul Andrews, National Western Stock Show.
Terrence Carroll, one of the co-facilitators and treasurer of the Western Stock Show Association.
Maria Garcia Berry with CRL Associates, and I'm a co-facilitator.
Liz Adams with CRL Associates, and I'm staffing the meetings.
Gretchen Hollera, I'm the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center.
Debbie Cram, Swansea.
An icon. Our icon.
John Sapien and Es Primavera. It's springtime.
Our wannabe icon, John Zapien.
Can't top that, I quit. Larry Burgess, Business Association.
Jim Garcia with Clinica Tepeyac.
Jeremy Rowland, Family Environmental.
Slavica Bob, Focus Points Family Resource Center.
Liliana Flores Amaro, representing Swansea.
Dave Olewski, Globeville.
Ann Elizabeth, 10,000th Generation Earthly, currently in Globeville.
That was good. You don't like being, yeah. That's right.
Spring's in the air. Yes.
Ann Hayes with Westfield.
Eric Anderson, Design Manager for the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center.
Dan Weiser, Office of the National Western Center.
Jen Espinosa, Communications Director for the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center.
Carrie O'Connell with Mortensen.
Jessica Orlin, Community Wealth Building Network.
Michelle Sturm, Community Wealth Building Network.
Jason Gallardo with CRL Associates.
Yes, and I'd like to point out that he's a new acquisition to CRL, so please welcome Jason from CRL.
Christoph Kahn, Florida Museum of Transportation.
We stole them from Bennett.
Chris Carvel, Carvel Architects.
Paul Engel with Amoresco.
Hi, I'm Julie Steen with CIG. I'm part of the placemaking team.
Steve Ruby with McKinstry.
Ashley Brassvan, McKinstry.
David Clamage, Salisbury Hill Financial McKinstry, and an old friend of Tracy's.
Brendan Lynch with Saunders Construction. Michael Sapp, NDCC, National Western Center.
All right.
And let me just make a quick note to everybody here. If you signed up on the guest sign up, I will put you on the list to get notices of the meeting. But if you didn't sign it so that I could read it, you won't get a notice. So if you want to drop a business card with me as well, you can do that. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, so partner and NDCC updates, where are we starting?
National Western.
National Western, yeah. Okay, thank you. Here, do you take over?
Okay, you should have a handout. Looks like that got sent out to everybody. I'm assuming, Liz, so First bullet point, we're preparing for Rodeo All-Star Weekend, April 13th and 14th. We're also preparing hard on the Denver County Fair with all sales and service people from July 13 to 15 is the county fair this year. We are reviewing horizontal infrastructure construction firms' contracts as part of the recommendation to the city of the process. We are a non-voting part of that, but we are an influencer. And we are also working with CH2 on the placemaking team for design work for the Yards, Livestock Center, and Equestrian Center. So that is what we're working on.
Any questions for Paul? Okay, seeing none. Colorado State University.
So you all, as Paul mentioned, have a handout in front of you with our updates. So everything that we think you need to know is there. One thing I'll mention is just some outcomes from our listening tour that we took between the last time I saw you and now, where we went out on the Eastern Plains and had conversations with some of our extension agents and our rural audiences about educational offerings. It was interesting to hear from them that they're interested in training teachers here at National Western, and also interesting to hear that just because there are kids who are living in rural and agricultural communities, they don't necessarily know that much about agriculture and food systems. So the kinds of content we're offering here will still resonate there as well. And so that was good to hear. Thank you.
Any questions for Jocelyn? Okay, Denver Museum of Nature and Science.
Hello, I think everything you need to know is right there on the list, so just let me know if you have any questions about upcoming events or anything else. Oh, and spring break is next week, so plan ahead. Come early.
Any questions?
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to think before we moved on to this issue. Hold on. Is that okay with that?
You have questions for who?
Jocelyn.
Okay, Jocelyn.
So I was really happy to see and hear the offer. Is that in here or was it online? I can't remember. The offer to set up meetings with CAC members in the process of getting the design going for the water resources and the Equine Center. So I just wanted to kind of put a little exclamation mark point on that and ask how we can crystallize that. Is that like, should we get a list of people that want to be there, or do you just want people to contact you that would like to get, have a conversation? You know, you just said set up hours and stuff.
Yep. So I might ask our chairs and Liz to help us just set up a time, and whomever is interested in coming to meet with the teams for both the Water Resources Center once we're in design, and also then to see the program plan for the Animal Health Building. We'll just schedule those, and whoever can come can come.
So I should have asked both questions at once. The other question I had, should I just shout? Is this your aerobics exercise? Is this your CRL health plan? Can you just remind us what the nature of the partnership is with Denver Water, with National Western Center? Because I think there's some exciting things happening with that.
Yeah, so the first part of that partnership is that Denver Water will be locating their water quality compliance lab with the Water Resources Center. So that is the laboratory that tests water quality samples from within their service area, everything from things that are coming out of taps to stuff that's in streams and in the watershed that feeds their service area. The other component of that is educational offerings and collaborative research as is appropriate. And there are lots of different ways that could go that we're still thinking about and will change over time. They also have a role to play site-wide in looking at opportunities for demonstration projects and research and education throughout the full National Western, not just at the Water Resources Center. And they also have a second hat to wear as the water utility for the site, and they've been working more closely with the city than with me, I would say, on that particular role that they play.
Thanks. I wanted to give a shout out to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science to look at all these significant activities that are being provided to children in GES. And I know some things are in cooperation with the NETC, and Focus Points is involved in the GES Coalition. This really shows getting into the community and providing really important activities to the children. So I think you really shine. The museum really shines in having a presence with the children in GES.
All right. Okay, my only other comment is thank you, Liliana, for suggesting. We've gotten really good feedback on the written one-pagers ahead of time. So thank you for suggesting that. All right, next on the agenda, we're going to turn it over to John and to Liliana to give an update on the authority.
Oh, there. I lost you. I need to use your microphone and you guys.
You might as well have Liliana, the other one, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Liliana, please.
Sure. So I don't have a whole lot of updates since our first meeting was right before our last CAC meeting. So in that meeting, it was our very first meeting. We talked about the importance of the community benefits agreement and the community investment fund, and we're starting to get some traction rolling on that as far as research. So we, as the authority and as well as the community, probably need a little bit more information around what a community benefits agreement could look like, what has been successful, what hasn't worked. And so I think Drew, well, I'm not sure is here yet, but he made a recommendation. Oh, there you are. Hi, Drew. Made a recommendation that the community folks should probably meet, and so I did not make that happen before this meeting, and so I'm going to put it back on my list to try and get another meeting organized so that we can talk in a little bit more detail about what we can get ourselves oriented around what a community benefits agreement is, what a community investment fund could look like, and so we're going to do the same thing with the advisory board as far as just getting better educated and sort of getting our footing right on what a community benefits agreement could look like for us. So our next authority meeting is next Thursday, the 29th, 9:30 a.m. I believe you all are welcome to attend. And then John has another update on the search process for the executive director.
The show's on the road now. The gentleman was in town, spoke with him yesterday.
Can you hold the mic up to your mustache?
Right here? How's that? That gets static, that's why. A gentleman by the name of Len Perna was in town yesterday, and I spent about close to an hour with him. We had a very interesting conversation. They're on a nationwide search for the executive director, and along those lines, if you know anybody that you think would fit that position, feel free to submit some names, either to Liliana, myself, Nadia, or right directly to the mayor's office. So we had a very interesting conversation, and one of the main points that I tried to get across to him, and I wasn't trying to be too sensitive about this, but the issue I spoke about was minority, equal employment opportunity for male and female. And my position was, look, we need a person that's able to get the job done. Find the best person, regardless of ethnic background, male or female. If they're qualified and able, we need to get this show on the road. These concerns about the neighborhood surrounding is going to be an ongoing effort. I tried to the best of my ability, to show him that it has to be done in such a manner as to not impede the progress of the National Western Center complex. That's got to be done first. Otherwise, the benefits to the communities is going to be non-existent. So the priority now is to hire someone that can get the job done and get it moving so that we can make these other things work to the best of everyone's ability. You've heard me speak in the past in this effort group here about our mutual interests. And that certainly is the most paramount mutual interest that we have today. To get this thing moving so that we can start dealing with the benefits that obviously are going to benefit our neighborhoods. Brad, would you like to speak about something, who he met with and you took him around to meet different people, please?
Sure. Sure. Hi, Brad Dotson, Deputy Director of the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center. As John said, Lynn Perna from Turnkey was in Denver for about 24 hours, maybe less than 24 hours. And each of the notification was sent out to the full authority board, and everyone was given an opportunity to meet with them. I think more than half of the board members took us up on that offer and were able to spend 45 minutes or an hour with Lynn. He also met with each of the equity partners, so spent time with CSU, with the WSSA, as well as with a couple individuals from the mayor's office.
I just wanted to jump in to clarify the role that the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center is playing here. We have an assignment from the framework agreement anticipating getting a head start on the search. So our office is serving as the administrative lead and the contracting entity. And our biggest responsibility was doing a competitive process to hire the search firm. So we interviewed, we sent out an RFP. Did we do it? We did an RFP, yep. We got responses. We interviewed 3 firms. Len was from the successful firm, Turnkey. And so this was the first visit out so they could start to do some research and interviews and start to understand what the needs were for this position. I would just want to clarify that if people have candidates, it would be much more appropriate to send them to members of the authority board who will be the deciders here, and Brad and I will continue to administer the process. But the decision-making responsibility here rests with the board, and then our team continues to lead the construction.
Actually, I was honestly impressed by Mr. Perna's conversation, and we had really good conversation. We spoke about our backgrounds to each other, about where, and at the end of the session, the meeting with him, and this guy was on kind of a treadmill speed meeting schedule. So, but I was very appreciative of the time he did take, and I believe that he's going to be doing the best possible job he can on our behalf. And I expressed that to him, that I had confidence in their selecting a group of people that we can select the executive director from. I'm confident in this process. So I want to make sure that you all have continued input through either Liliana, myself, or anyone else that you might feel appropriate to. And we'll certainly bring as much information as we can as we get doing more efforts in the future. So we'll leave it at that.
Great. Questions for Liliana and John? Here.
This is kind of a general question, but is this also an open call with a posted job description? And I'm interested in what the job description is, because we did have some conversation about having some input into that, and I think it's a good idea. And then also, is there a consideration of an implementation of the model that we talked about that the Denver Public Library used, where they had an open public session for conversation with the final selection of candidates?
So in the firm interview process, we did reference that request from the CAC and have shared that also with Turnkey now that they're in place. that as they are looking to create a job description and a salary range. They have been already asking about places to post that, and I believe they would like to put a link on the nationalwesterncenter.com website that would link into their site. So they run the process, but that would be the portal for the broader set of applicants. So he did ask us that question, and that's something that we can make available when he's ready for that. So that would be an easy way for folks to direct. I think as a CAC, you may or may not want to have discussions here first, or you may want to send candidates directly through there, but either would be an option. And then I think the board, when they discuss with Len, just need to reinforce that they want to have that type of process. And I did use the city librarian as the example during the interview process and said that would be an expectation from the community.
To AE's other question though, will there be input on the job description itself?
To my understanding, they're using the interviews as the input, which is why they reached out to the authority board members. And they also met with the partners, and they met with Visit Denver. And so if there are other folks, this is not the only round of interviews. So if there are other interviews that need to happen, I'm sure that Len would be open to that, and then we'll help schedule that.
So can I do just a quick follow-up? So I definitely share John's confidence in the process, knowing a little bit about turnkey. And I also value anybody on the CAC that wants to look at a draft. I think we've learned some lessons about what people can contribute if they see documents early enough. And so I would request that a draft job description be available. It doesn't need to be circulated, but that if it could be reviewed and a more formal entry point be offered for people to get a hold of whoever they do to just look at that.
So and I'll hand this to John, that's for the authority to direct the process. So initially, if you recall from the framework agreement, and this was in part because we didn't understand the timing of when the authority would be able to sit down. There's a group of 3 individuals, one from each of the equity partners of the framework agreement, that are doing some of this initial input. Now that the authority is actually seated, they are a participant in this and ultimately provide the direction to the firm. So I would hand that question back to the authority representatives that are here, of which there are 3.
Well, one of the things that Mr. Perna did, Len, I'll just call him Len, he asked me directly as to the sensitivity of the surrounding neighborhoods and how people might react to the salary range that would be expected for the executive director. And simply I said, look, you know, you go to the store, you can buy hot dogs, you can buy hamburger or prime rib. You get what you pay for. And if salary becomes an issue, it behooves us as neighborhood representatives to deal with that. And I reassured him that I'm sure there will be some people that may say, you know, golly, they're paying him blah, 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 whatever. But I said I will counter that with the fact that we want to get the job done. And we want to get it done as efficiently as possible, and reassured you're not going to get a prime rib type of an individual at a price of hot dogs. And just to be blunt and practical about it, and I just laid it on the line that way. Find us the best person you can, and we'll have to deal with whatever fallout comes. That's what we're here for. And I'm very confident in their ability to do so. So we'll take it to the next step and come back to you and let you know what we have.
I think we'll put the request forward to the board to see if we can get a copy circulated to CAC members for feedback. I'm not sure, I couldn't go to to meet the gentleman from Turnkey, so, and we'll just have to follow up, I think, and get a better sense of timeline and kind of what all that looks like, and to make sure folks have what the amount of time we have for feedback on that process is.
Okay. Anything else for Liliana or John? Okay, and the next board meeting of the authority is next week, correct?
Yeah, next Thursday.
Okay, next Thursday, all right. Okay, so turning to CAC specific items, Mickey Zeppelin sent us an email a couple of weeks ago. He sent one to me, he sent one to Jocelyn, to Julie, to Gretchen, asking for some clarifications. We do not have, we were trying to pull up your email up here, Mickey, so everybody could see it, so everybody understands the thrust of your email. I'm going to turn it over. We've all talked because you had multiple issues in your email. So there is a written response that's going to be handed out to everybody, so everybody has it. And I'm going to turn it over to Gretchen to walk through it since they coordinated it. Because your email touched on multiple components. So that's what we did. So
Thanks. And so thank you for the email. And I took it for the opportunity it presented, which is there have been years of discussion about this. And I do think, and you'll see this in the letter, I just wanted to talk about it for a minute first, and then, because as soon as I hand it out, everyone will start meeting and stop listening. The questions are the right questions, which is how do you connect the dots from some of the earliest discussions through the master plan, and then through to what you see in all of the phase 1 and 2 program and all the placemaking efforts. So it was a set of questions. Since we don't have it up here, is this buzzing? Is there a different microphone I can use? Okay. It was a set of questions that...
And you don't have a mustache.
Thank you for that observation. It was a set of questions that were both very specific about the placemaking team's work and the survey and what was there. So this memo, I made it broader to not just a response to Mickey, I actually made it a response to the CAC so it can be part of the ongoing set of documents that we record against this project and how we proceed. I've also asked our team, and we did not have enough time to do this for today, but to come back next month and to start, we're lucky that we've got Eric Anderson on our team because he's been there and worked through the master planning effort, as have a number of you. I do want to set forward a timeline because we will continue to introduce new participants to this, and it will help establish that historic memory around how we got to where we are today. And I don't want to lose that because this upfront work is the most important, and I say that as a city planner by training. And so what this memo does, I wanted to have it addressed to the CAC, and I'll pass it out now. Or Liz, should we pass it around? And it talks... It addresses both those specific questions, but it also answers the questions about what happened from the documents in 2014 and 15 to how we got to the master plan to how we got to here. And it's not a complicated answer. So let's hand this out, and I'll answer a couple of things, and then I think we should, if it's all right, Maria, if we pause for just a minute, let people take a look, and then kind of have a conversation about it, because there's probably additional material we need to bring forward in addition to this timeline, and I do want to make sure we're connecting the dots. We've already done that on some of the how we got to the 2C ballot measure, but I think we need to just take one step back in time there too.
yeah, I also think, I'm trying to pull up Mickey's email.
Yeah.
Because it'd be helpful to recast his questions.
Yeah, and instead of reading this out loud, I'm just going to summarize the different paragraphs and what they say. So the first is what I've just described, is that we are trying to clarify how all these different actions connect. The other thing you'll see in the placemaking presentation is I've asked Eric, it's a complicated multitask contract, and we're going to start showing you all the tasks we've done and all the ones that are coming and highlight the one we're talking about right then. Otherwise, it's really hard to see which place we're in and look ahead to the future of what we're going to do. So the first paragraph really is talking about why we wanted to do this in this format, and that it's pretty important to have a timeline. The second is specific response to the user survey in late fall of 2017 that was really kept brief. It does not have all the detail, and that's a trade-off between getting the user response and getting the broad response. So we were successful in that. It did not have all of the detail that the placemaking team is considering. To that end, we can have a discussion about how we might want to get additional points of input. It's not one survey and then we're done. We are looking at then on the bottom of the first page, sorry this is so long, that they are using the survey as one piece of the input that the campus placemaking team is using. And it talks about the geography of phases 1 and 2, which is largely west and north of the BNSF rail line, with the exception of things like Brighton Boulevard and the Marion Underpass. And then the first full paragraph on page 2 talks about those 2014 and 15 documents. So there was a lot of really robust discussion about a number of elements, and I want to pull forward a couple of examples that I'm aware of, including a recreation center, including a new DPS school. And quite frankly, as the prioritization of the master plan went forward, those elements were either not the highest priority identified by the team in the ongoing discussions. They were either resolved, or many of them were moved forward to the neighborhood plans. Other components, and the rec center would be an example, were moved forward to the city department that took them on, and for the example of the rec center, moved them forward to a geo bond conversation and other rec center improvements. So that just moved outside of this zone of the National Western Center campus, but back into the public agency of the city, or a partnering public agency like DPS, and into their work programs. What happened then was the master plan was adopted, and it was the refined plan, and it was unanimously approved by City Council. So from the point of a master plan process where you put everything on the table and you go through a series of refinements and you come up with a plan, that's the place that we're in now. And what we have done is we are taking those documents and still carrying them forward, because they have a lot of intelligence in them that need to be considered for opportunities. Just because the master plan has identified the core assets that we are compelled to deliver, and we always have to go back to the master plan. If there's an opportunity to do more, or there's an opportunity that we can partner with other city departments or other public agencies, we just don't want to lose sight of that list. That's a comprehensive list of community needs that the National Western Office and the campus, we partner with the NWC-CAC on all the time. And I think I've said this before, the first meeting that I have every week is with the NWC-CAC team, and we think about how we're being strategic together, how we take known needs that are or are not a part of the campus back out to community, and how we fit community needs on the campus, and it's really important. So that is the first full paragraph on the top of page 2. And then, as I said, we'll continue to refine, and it talks a little bit about the process that the placemaking team will use. That continues through the interviews that have happened, and really more detail about the process for placemaking. And again, at the last paragraph, moving on to talk about some of these tasks that we'll be outlining every single meeting: the campus cultural plan, the public art master plan, the interface with streets and public rights of way. And I wanted to conclude, the very last paragraph says that our intent here is, we saw a really successful master plan effort come through. There was a lot at the City Council approval process. There was a lot of community support that was voiced, and I think that was a successful process, largely because it was community driven and it had a lot of real participation. And that's going to be fundamental to what we do as we move forward with phase 1 and 2 and this program, this capital build program, over the next 7 years. And then as we move into this next discussion about the rest of the campus, being highly transparent, having a robust public process and discussion, that's our goal. And if you need us to do something different, and you feel like there's another forum that we should have for this kind of discussion, I'm completely open to it, and so is our team. So that's it in a summary. And I don't know if you want to take questions or comments.
By the way, Paul is making copies of, that was our oversight, we should have brought the original email. So Paul's making chances. Mickey?
I apologize.
If I may, I'd like to pass out the 2014 community input.
Can you pass a couple down this direction?
There's enough, hopefully, for almost everybody.
Is this the attachments that you put in the email?
This was the attachment,
okay.
But I did send it to everybody. I
right.
did send it to a few people.
Got it.
But looking at the attachment, basically it was a much more community-oriented approach. I think my concern about the placement is we have a bunch of individual items, a playground of this, of that, a marketplace, a drugstore, all of those places are nice to have, but unless you integrate those into the community, you just have a series of not even places, of sites. And I think what this does is really say, let's look at this in a comprehensive way. In fact, if you look at the last page, or the last paragraph, they talk about connecting all of the parks. They talk about basically the trails. They talk about, I mean, what I'd like to see in placemaking is a place. I mean, what we're not seeing is a place. What we're seeing is a series of sites that really don't make a community, that aren't integrated into what we have here. We have one of the greatest opportunities. We have about 200 acres. We have, certainly when you include the Heron Pond area, all of the area, the industrial area. There's an opportunity to build what is an internationally known and certainly a place in this city that is really connected, that provides housing, that provides services, that really makes a statement in terms of what this whole area is. What I see is an industrial piece, a rodeo, a stock show piece, a bunch of separate components. And I think what came through over and over again in these items, if you look at them, is let's integrate it. Let's make the paths. Let's have, instead of just having a stock show, let's make sure we have a farm that people in the neighborhood can be involved in. Even though we're not talking about a school at this point, I think we need to look at that. I mean, this is the opportunity to create a place where you have children learning about the occupations of the future, about water, about the environment, about about health, about all of the things, about animals, about food, all of that. It needs to be much more integrated. It just seems to me we have a lot of pieces, and that was the beauty of this. It really integrated it with trails, with the parks. It says all of the parks should be connected. And what I've seen, and having served on the Heron Pond Committee, the Washington Street thing, on this group, looking at the industry, we have a bunch of pieces, and I think that this is the opportunity to create something that doesn't exist anywhere else. I mean, I read today about Aurora building this community, 26,000 houses, and so many thousand feet of 100,000 feet of industry. That's not what we're looking for, but I think we can build the kind of special place, make sure there's housing, making sure that we're connecting to the communities. And that's really my concern when I come here and see the board with some items of saying there's a playground, there's a drugstore, there's a grocery store, there's a market of some kind. I mean, those are all important, but I think what we're at least my vision when I got involved here, is creating a very special place. This is an opportunity which certainly doesn't exist anywhere else in the city. I mean, this much land, basically an industry base, and $2 million of funding, a university, the opportunity to really include the whole community. And I just want to look at it not as pieces, but I think that our design team needs to look at it on a more integrated basis and not break it out into this building and this historic thing, but how does it all fit together? How do we make it a place? I mean, this should be recognized worldwide as really the center of the new world of health and environment and food and water and basically a place where people who really haven't had opportunity get opportunity. I just think we're not looking at it in a large enough picture, and that's what I think. If you look through the ideas that are in here, I'm saying let's make sure that we include those and not just look at individual places.
If I could respond, yes, that is the goal, and we share that goal. The placemaking team, and you'll see this as we walk through their tasks, they're not doing cultural discussions of historic assets one by one. They're doing a campus cultural plan. Everything they're looking at is assignment at the campus level. The broader question then, and I've not seen this addressed as anything other than a campus discussion so that these parts stick together. And as we move to the remaining parts of the agenda, there are some specific tasks that we have. We have to understand the 1909 Stadium Arena so we can move it in to be a fresh food market and a community asset. So there are some individual studies going that will be built into a campus-wide framework. So I would hold it to the CAC. If you see us doing a task that needs to be campus-wide and it's not in the placemaking, we will address it as a campus issue, just quite frankly. And when we go through that, I would have us, and I know Eric is going to present this, tell us as we go through it, that looks like you're missing the connection between this and this, or please make sure, and reinforcing that isn't a bad idea. We do have, even in the placemaking tasks, a list of the other projects, Heron Park included, that they have to be referencing in the context of the campus also. So their specific instructions by their task per their contract is that they have to look regionally at all the other assets in this area, including the community. So that's something that we work on as a city. But also, again, if you see that connection not being made, that's something that Tim and I need to fix. So I agree with you entirely that this has the opportunity to be something incredibly dynamic and not just another development. It is rooted in these communities. There are some specific assets that we need to build. Those are called out in the site plan, which I appreciated the approval of from this group and the support of it. It tackles a lot of those assets that we need. There's a couple more that are left that we'll talk about in the last piece that we're presenting. And then we need to figure out what is the other opportunity in that remaining 60 acres of what place should it become. So the placemaking task for this team is phases 1 and 2, but they are not just looking at phases 1 and 2. Their tasks are the entire campus around the market studies, around the campus cultural plan, around public realm and programming. They are looking at it holistically.
Questions, comments from the rest of the group? AE?
Are there a number of people named Tim? I didn't know.
That's Tim.
Okay.
Sorry, Tim
I
Sandos.
missed,
Yeah, sorry.
My friends call me Tim.
Okay, I'm looking forward to anything that's response to the concern I addressed at the last CAC meeting regarding the outreach strategy around getting more input. In direct response to, does there need to be an adjustment, Gretchen, your invitation? I honestly, and I don't mean to be contentious, but I am absolutely baffled at this survey. I don't like seeing percentages of the community said this and this and this without it being disclosed immediately, that there were less than 100 that from within 80216, I think, that responded to the survey. I feel like I had several experiences at the Denver Public Library where I taught that Marcy was gracious enough to get a bound copy, and we worked on that, and I think we need to get more of the master plan at the library. I don't understand why we're doing surveys of that nature with no context. It is significant to me that the first draft of the survey was appropriately pulled back because it was not at all coming out of the culture of the master plan. But with people that have looked at that map, I've done a couple things, and I can't, such a small, unscientific, but if I put that master plan in front of somebody at the Valdez Prairie Library and say, hey, check this out and tell me what excites you about this. It's phenomenal how deeply people go into that have never even known for some reason, even though they've been here for 60 years and their grandchildren are now here, that this is going on. But if I put that questionnaire in front of people, people start asking questions. Well, who's deciding this? When did this happen? I don't know. This is weird, you know. So I really feel like we're not doing it. I would rather that we get the Permanent Authority Board out there. Let's have a big gathering. Let's bring in the market study. Let's appoint I don't like doing it on a PR and communications basis. I don't want I don't want things to be getting in between the neighborhood and the principals that are developing now. So that is the best voice I can give to my frustration, because I feel like it feels a little bit too much like a rock skipping across the surface of a deep lake.
Yeah, John, before you look, John, anything else?
Well, I certainly share some of your concerns, E. And first of all, first of all, I want to make sure, Mickey, I appreciate the work and effort you've put into this, bringing it to our attention again. I think that we're indeed very fortunate that we have someone like Mickey doing this. And as I go through this, my memory goes back, and I'm disappointed in some of these things. My personal feeling is that even though it's not thoroughly connected here, that it's not totally out of the question. There's always that possibility, and short of setting up a whole system of ward captains and paid street workers to lay out the information, I think it's going to be a constant effort on all of our parts to get this information out to the concerned individuals that live in the neighborhood and the business people that want to do business here. So that old saying that water finds its own level, well, right now some of us feel inundated. We've certainly got a lot of information. I remember when I said, Paul, we should have a velodrome out here, you know, and it's not in the plan. But doesn't mean that it can't happen down the line. And I certainly, as far as the Olympic-sized swimming pool, you know, we need a wellness, things like that. But the information and the connections are yet to be made thoroughly. We need to be working on that. And I think that's one of the issues that the authority is going to have to be struggling with constantly and dealing with. We have to develop a method, a foolproof method, of getting information disseminated, which shows how long we depend on Facebook, because we'll get hacked. Anyway, there's a lot of work to be done yet, and I just feel that this is a good effort for ongoing concerns, communications, and certainly we got to set a sense of priority here, and that's what I think we need to do.
So I wanted to say one thing for AE, if you and I could talk after this and help with Julie and just understand if we've got some ideas. It's not just a survey, just to remind everyone, there are multiple ways we're trying to outreach to people, and we're open to it. I do want to remind everybody, and this was going to be in my updates on April 12th, we have another public meeting. How can we get more people to that meeting, and how do we make that meeting more effective? We have tons of folks coming to these industry forums because it's all about the contracts. How do we get that same response from community? And then how do we explain what we're doing in a way that shows this is a master plan? Here's a part of the campus we're developing, but in the framework of the entire thing. And then we're going to have 2 more years of discussion on what happens with phases 3 through 8, which we've nicknamed the triangle. We have not even begun that piece. And all this work carries forward, and we really look at, there are some things that we have to develop, the arena, the expo hall, structured parking, we have to do the stadium arena or we won't get that place for fresh food. Beyond that, what do we need to do? What should happen with housing and affordable housing on this site? What does community serving retail look like? How is the authority successful managing this? So there's a ton of conversation left to do. Phases 1 and 2 is a portion of it. If you see us not do it in a campus context, let me know. And I'd love specific ideas about outreach that we can talk to the placemaking team about, because I know Julie's open to it and so is our whole team.
Mickey?
One thing I want to mention, this goes back to 2014, and actually it was a compilation of what happened at the original Estes Park meeting, and we basically boiled it down to this document.
Right.
I don't recall ever saying that there's a replacement document that we're moving forward on in terms of placemaking, as you indicated, that we kind of arrived at a place where we accepted. If I'm wrong, then that's all the better, all the better.
Yeah.
But I think that certainly since the time we started this document, things have definitely changed. I think that the need for housing, the need for really looking at different areas, whether education or rec centers or any or trails or how this works, is what we need to look at now and to say that we're there. And the other aspect is in terms of these meetings, as a developer, I think it makes more sense to look at a plan rather than say, these are a list of 15 items which people like. So we're going to go ahead and do something without really looking at a larger plan of where the trails connect, where you get to the river, how you get to the parks. That, we've not seen any of that.
No, that's because we're still working on it, and we're going to. I'll update you on that. All that stuff is in this contract.
Okay, well, I called you 2 times to ask you about that, and I have not got a response.
It's all in there, and we are working that, and so over the next few months, we're going to be bringing you lots of things to talk about regarding that.
So that's part of why, and it has been confusing even for folks at the city that aren't on the team, if we can hold that until we show you all the tasks and where we're at and what's still coming. If you see something missing, tell us. We are really committed to bringing this material to you and getting input. And but I do need to show you where we're at in that process, and then I think we could continue that discussion.
Yeah. Mickey, I just want to hey, hold on. Anybody? Drew, okay. I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. There's not been a subsequent document ever adopted or embodied on placemaking since the master plan. The master plan is the only thing we have. So I just want to make sure we're very clear on that. Yeah. We haven't even done technically we could potentially at some point do a master plan update, right? Because it's been now it's going to be,
Well, when I see the placemaking and what's in there, then I draw to the conclusion.
All right, but there's no other document that's ever existed or been adopted or done anything else concerning all of that. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. Hey, let me have Drew first, yeah. Can you pass this down to Drew?
Yeah, I just want to say, Nikki, thanks for bringing this up. I think this is a very aspirational document that we put a lot of work into, and it shouldn't just be forgotten. And I think that this, every now and then we need to check. Or this is a lens maybe, through which to look at the plan as it develops. So let's hold ourselves to this. Yeah. That's what, if you agree with it, let's hold ourselves to it. These are ideals, but we need to do it.
AE?
Mickey, I showed this to a few of the people I was talking with the other time you handed this out, and the consistent comment was, wow, that you can do all this? And I would say, yeah, it's a campus. It's what we want to do. It's a gestalt, to use a hippy-dippy word. But what I wanted to say regarding the invitation to talk to CIG,
Julie.
Yeah, Julie. I appreciate that, but I want to point one thing out. To me, building a constituency for the National Western Center. It's not, this whole thing about, look at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science statistics. Many years ago, and Jocelyn, you might remember this, the first time that the CSU did the vet thing, once the National Western Center, I went and sat in the lobby and talked to the people that were bringing, I was more interested in the animals, but I did talk to the people. And I discovered that there was, for example, a whole interest in dog obedience. There was some possible follow-up, and I said at the time, can we get a list of the people that are coming? This is a National Western Center constituency. We can build a constituency. The individual gave a shout out for what the museum did, but didn't mention Swansea Elementary School, which to me is the most important relationship. It is a sustainable relationship. 120 people from Swansea Elementary School, kids. We can have a constituency that is activated by broadcasts and by things and we can build a constituency now. All of this, and this is kind of what I feel like is a drum I've been trying to beat, and I ask for forgiveness for being ineffective. Every time somebody in these neighborhoods has an experience with one of our partners, whether it's the museum, CSU, etc., if we, and the stock show, the things that are going on in general, if we attach it to the National Western Center momentum through branding via relationships and our own enthusiasms, we're building a constituency. And so I would ask that we look at that and figure it out, and we can talk more about this with the board. I don't want there to be a hesitancy in forming the relationships that are here. And this was a concern I was talking and tried to address a little bit with CSU around the listening tour, is it's not a jigsaw puzzle, it's a weave. It's not several partners, it's the sum is greater than the parts. And people see this when you put the master plan and you put this in front. And we see the little things in the language we have to be careful of. When there was a report at one of the meetings, the public meeting about this is, the master plan is a little bit old now, but and I said, no, the master plan is alive, vital. We have to, and it's usually, in all honesty, without, it's usually the consultants, bless their hearts and their partnership, that aren't embedded in the project in that way. So anyway, I would just ask that we recognize we have a constituency for the National Western Center developing that can be exponential. You go back into Swansea Elementary School, and with the girl inside, all the tickets that I was given and that I had left in my possession for Denver Museum of Nature and Science, I gave to the girls in science. And I'm telling you something. This is phenomenal. I said, yeah, they're with the National Western Center. Wait till you see what we have on the campus when that comes. Oh, really? Wow, what is that? Well, go with your mom and read the master plan. And so there's a lot that we could do that is the relationships.
Anything else? Any other comments? Juan?
Estoy de acuerdo con
Okay.
I agree with you.
Yes, I also agree with A and several of the other comments that are shared here, and I think John and I will make sure to take that message loud and clear to the rest of the authority board that it's, it is about relationships. It is about, I think we have to honor and acknowledge kind of what the relationship was or wasn't in the past, but we are in this place now, and how can we really start, activating and building and rebuilding those relationships with community members and residents.
John?
With my interview with Mr. Perna, Lynn, that was a topic of discussion, and we both on the same level. Communications and relationships is crucial, it's important, especially with the rebuilding of the entire area here. The impact on the neighborhoods, I don't know how to begin to measure, but it's there, and we just got to deal with it. But it's acutely one of the awarenesses that I am trying to impress on Lynn in finding the exact officer that's going to run this whole show. So we're on that wavelength, and he certainly was impressed by that statement that I made. It's no secret, we have developed a stronger relationship with the National Western Stock Show group. The communities now are more aware of what's going on. There's a lot of work to be done there yet, but he was impressed and certainly made a strong note of that in his recruitment efforts, or his identifying talent effort. Thank you.
Anything else?
I have a question for Paul related to this, and it's real quick.
Paul, I'd be interested in the number of multi-decade employees that the stock show has, and the reason I ask is because during the 2C campaign, I knocked on a lot of doors where people have worked for even times a couple generations, and the loyalty of the individuals that has worked there. And I could easily envision having a party here for the National Western Stock Show longtime employees to give them a special briefing and build on that legacy. I have to say, I'm pretty amazed at some of the, and I still see people around and they're going to work, and within the 80216 neighborhoods, and this is part of stabilizing a neighborhood too, and elevating the awareness of who the people are that have these strong feelings. So what is the scope of that population?
So remember that during December, January, and early February, we hire 1,000 people. So about, I'm going to say about 900 of those 1,000 are returning people, some of them as long as 60 years. My full-time staff, I think the youngest person on staff has been here 4 years, and the person that's been here the longest is 28 years. So, but that's the 44 full-time staff I have. And I think you're referring more to the seasonal employees that we hire, and about 900 of them return every year, and some of them, again, 60 years in a row. So.
You also have a large number of volunteers.
Right, we have 700 volunteers, and again, we give out pins for people that have attained 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Boy, the people that had attained 30 years, we just gave out pins. I want to say there was 10 of them. So yeah, we have a very strong following. We're very thankful.
There's a lot, so.
Okay. So any other questions? It's good discussion. AE, you were incredibly articulate. You're always articulate, but you were very thoughtfully articulate tonight. I wrote down some of your quotes I'm going to start using. I wrote down some of your quotes I'll start using. I'll give you credit. But Tim.
There's a lot of great ones.
Monday, may I answer just one?
Yeah.
The fall fest, that's right. The fall feast was certainly added to that, because people from all, and they not only had a good time, but there's some connection there and growing.
Yeah, and we hope to continue to grow that, obviously. So.
Okay. All right, moving on to the NWC-CAC. Tim?
Thank you very much, Mayor. So in the packet that you received and in our new process, we were told that we could have one page to bring you up to speed on things we're doing. We, of course, took that to mean one page, and so we cheated and went on both sides. So we'll work at how we can reduce this in a way. The outline for this really goes through the key projects, programs, then what their description is, and immediate upcoming activities. We've listed the 8 projects that are going to have the most impact or having the most impact right now over the next 60 days. And just to put it in perspective, we have 6 portfolios. Those 6 portfolios have 187 different projects that we oversee, align, and coordinate to the major projects like National Western or like Central 70. And so the work that we do is align those projects, the schedules, the oversight of the teams that are doing them, to make sure that we're not closing the whole community down in one fell swoop. When you look at Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, we've got 6 really good access egress points. Then we've got 52 dead ends within those 6 points. We closed down 2 or 3 of those, and as we talked about earlier tonight about Riverside, we've now locked access away very, very quickly. And so part of what we're working on in these projects is, again, how do we align and coordinate those and then come up with a transportation model we're calling Navigate North Denver that will give you alternate routes, access, and ways to get back and forth. So the 8 projects that we have here are those critical projects, the descriptions and upcoming events. Again, just for a summary, when we ended the year last year, we had 27 projects that were in process. As of today, we have 47 projects in process. And over the next 60 days, we'll be expanding another 26. By this time next year, we'll have around 110 of those projects in process that we're overseeing, aligning, and coordinating. So one page is really hard for us to get to describe these, but we're going to do our best to try to keep those things of most importance in front of you. Now, I would like to really call attention on the backside, the Globeville Stormwater Systems study. We have begun that study. The project is really first to work with the community to identify a different toolbox of solutions that can alleviate the flooding, that improves our water quality, provides multiple community benefits for the existing community, and that preserves the environment so that we can increase green space and other things. And it's a tall task. This project would be very similar to what was done in the Upper Montclair area that created the P2P project and drainage. And now we're looking to be able to have a similar process for identifying what the options are and what the solutions are for addressing drainage and flooding in Globeville and the Utah Junction area. Now, in order to do this, we're following along with a lot of the processes that we used in Upper Montclair. And we've learned some very good lessons. We learned some very bad lessons that we don't want to do again. And so now we're going to take those and apply those as we look at Globeville. When we're looking at this, our process first was to identify a visualization integration team. Many of the people are on that VIT team are also members of the CAC. So Vern is a member. In fact, I've got a list of everybody who's here, and I apologize, I don't remember them offhand. But the first thing was to get the visualization team involved. Nancy Grady Jones and others are included in that, and start to identify exactly what we've learned about, I'm guessing it was in my time frame, so about 6 months ago, maybe 7 months ago, we completed a whole other study on Globeville drainage and learned a ton of things that we never knew before that time. And so we're re-educating all of the community through our processes through the VIT, and then what will be our open houses to really bring everybody up to speed on all the information that we've learned, what is the newest state-of-the-art that we've understood. The idea is to go through that process, and then after that, we will be able to go into identifying solutions and ways that we can address these issues. Now, up until now, we have had 2 of the VIT meetings. We have had a tour with the VIT to look at the sites and show what's there. We had committed to the CAC last year that we would come forward and inform the CAC prior to going to our public forums about the things that we've learned, what we're doing very similar to what we've done with the VIT. And so you'll remember last month we talked about coming to you to ask for a special meeting of the CIC to be able to talk about the Globeville drainage project and where we're at right now. And we promised to come back with dates. And so what I'd like to ask your help with is identifying the best time for a date for us to do the special meeting of the CAC specifically to talk about glow drainage, what we've learned and where we're going. So if I can ask you to write these down, and then I'm going to try to do a show of hands to identify which meeting time might work the best. We would like to recommend dates of Tuesday, April 3rd, and incidentally, each of these would be from 5 to 6:30. Wednesday, April 4th, Wednesday, April 11th, or Thursday, April 12th. Now, those would be the dates that we would have available. We only need to select one of when we could have a special meeting in the CAC to be able to present the Groveville drainage education strategy that we've got. So if I might, just by a show of hands.
The placemaking meeting, public meeting's April 12th.
April 12th.
Okay, so that one comes right off. Okay, so let me ask, how many people would like to go with Tuesday, April 3rd? Again, 5 to 6:30. And if we need to move that later, we can do that too if you wish. Can I see a show of hands? Who likes that day? Okay, we got a couple. How about Wednesday, April 4th? Okay, a few more. How about Wednesday, April 11th? Well, so far what I'm seeing is Wednesday, April 4th seems like the best time. Let me ask, with those of you who didn't raise your hand, is there a different way you would like us to do this? Another date, different times?
He said
he
wants it to be a special meeting with the CAC.
I have the mic, but I'm not going to give it to you.
I'll take it from you.
That's the way to do it. This fighting words.
Last time this came up, as you recall, I genuinely don't understand why we need a special CAC meeting for something that to me is not strictly NWC-CAC business. I would advocate for a very thoroughly planned outreach. I'd like you to name the residents that are on the visioning group. I'd like to know what the access to that is for in general. I'm very skittish about bleeding into parameters with these projects in the NDCC that I really genuinely feel are of much larger interest, even though there are impact points, which I really like to see us talk about, the impact points and the interrelatedness with what's going on with the NWC. But I don't quite understand why we have to constrain a thorough briefing to the CAC. Why can't we have a thorough briefing and engagement on a broad neighborhood wide, especially in Globeville, and instead of duplicating and increasing the number of meetings that the CAC is having?
Okay, because you asked, the CAC had requested to have a special meeting about Globeville drainage for CAC members in particular.
Was there I must have missed that, and if I did, I apologize. I don't remember requesting that myself. I remember there being some conversation. I don't recall the consensus being taken. I just, there may be individuals that would like that, and that's fine, but that's my voice.
In the meetings, and it was during the time I've been here, I'm now just finishing my 8th month. Probably in the 3rd or 4th month, a discussion was held with the CAC, and it was requested that we bring a special meeting about this and presentation to this group. And the reasoning for that at the time was we really wanted the CAC to be able to, and the request was that the CAC be able to hear this and see it before we actually went to committee or community process. Now, we are planning in May or June, depending on how we move, a couple of different public forums that are going to be open houses where we start to do these throughout the general community. But to your question, the request is made by the CAC that we do that. Now, We don't have enough people that are interested. We don't want to do that because people feel like they only want to see what's related to the Globeville drainage as it relates to National Western. We can do a special segment of that for this group tied to what happens with National Western and what some of the impacts are going to be. We're just trying to respond to what the request was originally.
Can I just put a little bit of a focus? I especially want to see what, and I'm sorry to yell, but I especially want to see what the relationship is to the National Western Center. It's not that I only, there's a big difference. And truly, it's an important point that public meetings, the full scope of the project, everyone deserves the equal briefing. But I feel like everything that, and people, I'm not, it's just thinking. Just everything we do on the National Western Center Citizens Advisory Committee is to put a spotlight on how are we contextualizing the National Western Center project with the Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, and neighborhood plans. So it's and I feel like I want to be able to articulate why the Globeville stormwater project has an interplay with what we're doing, because there are issues there, and there are potentials, and there are dangers, and there are important problems to solve and important things to communicate. But I don't feel that that has to have the scope of a full briefing. And when you say you want to re-educate the neighborhoods with this, I mean, you did say that you learned coming onto this job that it's a lot more complicated than you think, and I appreciate that, and you're doing that. But I would rather that there's a lot of people in the neighborhoods that know a lot about it. It would be great. The re-education isn't really exactly what's going on, but an expansion of knowledge is, and you're bringing in more studies, etc. And I'd love there to be a nice, clear page where all of these things are linked and all that, and we can reference it. But I'm just requesting that everything that comes from the larger scope of the NDCC be presented with, this is how it especially relates to what's going on with the National Western Center. And that focus can happen in these meetings if the time for your report is emphasizing that, which seems to me to be appropriate. But I'd like there to be a very rigorous public briefing at the very earliest stages, especially in Globeville with folks there. And I appreciate people that are on that vision committee and everything, but I want to know what the scope of it is. And I'd like to get, or sooner rather than later, the briefings over into especially the Globeville neighborhood.
John Sappy and then Michael Sapp.
No, it's John and then Bernard.
Okay, John then who?
Actually,
okay.
Yeah, and I can respond if you want me.
Just let me get through the rest of them.
let's wait for everybody.
Because there may be some overlap in
actually, there was some concern from this committee, and there is a relationship. How important that is now, certainly in coming years it will grow, because there's going to be a definite connection to the National Western Center. Drainage is a big problem, and it's being complicated by the work being done over here at the Globeville Landing, the Montclair, Park Hill, City Park. The whole shooting match had so many implications and ramifications from last year on. The drainage is a problem. It always has been. Everybody knows it runs downhill. And it's got to be dealt with. The importance will grow as we develop. And at this point, I have every bit of confidence in the work that's going on. From what I could see, the ability of those persons involved certainly will be under scrutiny. I don't think the people involved are going to buy a plain bill of goods. There's going to be a lot of concern about the ongoing problem with drainage as there's more and more development. So how we deal with it, I think, is a matter of timing. I don't know if we have to deal with it now or give the group more time to develop that so we can deal with it then. But it is a problem, and there is a connection. As to the timing, I'm not sure about it.
Vern?
Okay, I'd first like to say I'm probably one of those people that wanted this to be a part of the CAC. Because I feel too that the issues that we have all along through here isn't just the drainage in Globeville. Okay, it's what's going to be taking place in the river here. The National Western is going to redevelop this area, and they're going to make changes to a lot of portions of along that river. And there's going to be no changes on the Globeville side of that. Notwithstanding, as they develop this area, there's a substantial amount of draining for this entire 200-acre site that's going to drain into that river and again affect that. But there's going to be no change to the west side of the river. So I believe that the development of this whole entire area, that this should be a part of all of it. It should be a part of Globeville, it should be a part of the National Western, it should be a part of the Army Corps of Engineers study that we've been promised for the last 2 years that we haven't gotten yet. All of this is a part of the same picture. And I would like to see all of us at the table. We've been to 2 or 3 of these meetings now, and I haven't seen anybody from CSU, I haven't seen anybody from the National Western being a part of any of this at this point. And so it concerns me. And it especially concerns me being on the west side of the river and looking at the differences in the elevations. So, you know, I think when we think about this, this affects this whole entire development throughout this whole area. Washington Street and how they're going to handle the drainage along there. Heron Pond and what they're going to do over in that area through there. It's all part of the same picture, and we all need to be at the same table.
So Liz, if Tim gave 3 dates, and so if we can give those dates to Liz, and if you all could respond, it looked like April 3rd was the preferred date, but if you all could respond to Liz.
It was April 4th.
Or the 4th, if the 4th is the preferred date, and you guys can send that to Tim and I, that would be great.
Okay, so I just handed the dates. I'm sorry.
Nancy. No, Nancy just raised her hand.
It seems like there's 2 ways to go about this, is to have a presentation here at the CAC where you have a lot of the MOU partners here and a lot of other people that are related to the National Western Center development that come to these meetings. So, you know, to me the question might be, from the CAC, who would like to have the presentation about, and we call it the Globeville drainage, but it's the whole, I mean, if there's some other name, you know, it's not just stuck on the storm drainage. And I think, as Vern said, the intersection with NWC and the river, you know, and when we're looking at the river and the VIT meetings, we want to look at that regionally too. It's just not the Globeville section. But anyway, so maybe we could look at who would like to have that presentation at a CAC meeting, who would like to have it in some separate meeting. But still have that. I think it is very, very important because we do have the partners that come from the the NWC partners that come here, and they do need to have that involvement. At least have the information on what's happening with the river.
Can I just jump in here before AE says something? We are spending an awful lot of time trying to figure out a meeting, which in itself is problematic. There's some dates on the table, and I'll suggest that we try to get those dates circulated, and those folks in the CAC who would like to have a briefing with Tim and his team, they simply RSVP back to whoever they have to RSVP to, and that way we can move on with the rest of the meeting instead of spending an inordinate amount of time discussing when to have a meeting.
Sounds good. I think it's fine for anybody who wants to go to any meetings with anybody. I just want to say, Vern, what you said I feel does add a focus to what we could have a conversation about here. I don't agree with you that nothing's going to happen on the west side of the river. There's conversation. We need to activate so that it does, because we discussed this in the Globeville neighborhood plan. Just because it's being neglected doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It means we can't neglect it, which is what is being brought out by these conversations. Because there are ideas out there and advocacy. There were conversations about some of it some of the conversations with the Carpios and Segueti Park and Heron Pond. What can we do to leverage with the National Western Center? Some things that we can do in there. So with this, the same, I've heard for years conversation among people involved in the neighborhood planning process. How are we going to get attention to that, to the other side of the river? So we do need to crystallize that. But I think it is a good focus to say here, you know, what you were talking about. There is a relationship between both sides of the river, and we need to be talking about it here. So, and I also do agree that there's regional issues, and that's where I feel like these larger public meetings, more inclusive public meetings, are really important. And I would completely support a presentation with that focus that Vern was talking about, especially adjacent to the National Western at the CAC with the MOU partners, and any additional conversations people want to have with NDCC and additional meetings, fine. But I do think it would be good to have a cohesive presentation here.
We'll figure out how to have a more narrowly focused meeting that relates to more precisely to what the CAC is doing as it relates to the stormwater project or the Globeville project. But we also will still, if Tim and team want to have their other meeting, that's still definitely something we'll circulate the dates on so that we can kind of move along.
Nancy.
And I don't need a microphone, but I want to give kudos to Tim for trying to, for being proactive and being responsive to what he has heard here at CAC and trying to respond in, just trying to respond to the community and to the CAC here. So thank you, Tim.
Hopefully this will be a summary. I just want to address some of the questions that were asked. So first off, thank you very much, Nancy. All we're trying to do is be responsive to what this group directed us to do, and that's why I came to the meeting. I have no intention, Terry, of saying I want to capitalize 20 minutes for a discussion on a meeting. So that wasn't my intent. That's not what I'm bringing. And I hope people understand that. The second thing is I used a bad phrase. I said re-educate. That was bad. There are a lot of people who know a lot of these things. There's new education. There's new stuff that we never knew. And when we talk about how this interrelates and does it, I didn't go into all the description because that in fact is what the whole process is about. It's to show everybody all the different interrelations in different parts. If you just, I'd ask people, drive up to 51st and Zuni, stand at the top of the hill and look down, and you will automatically see that it's a bowl and where the water is coming from all areas, including Heron Park and what's going to impact National Western. So this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It does impact everything. And that's all part of the education that we're trying to get to. It's very clear that we can't cover all the things we need to talk about, from what NWC-CAC is involved in or even on something that interrelates in these meetings. And we talked about that earlier. That's something I think that we're going to grapple with as we have more and more in the National Western footprint that grows. You're going to have less and less time to be able to address things. So we have to do them in separate venues. And if it's the pleasure of the CAC, we'll do special meetings for you. If you prefer to participate in the other community events and open houses, we'll do that too. So we were just trying to respond to what the request was from the group. And so if we can get whatever dates out, people can respond who will be able to do that. I think you will really be fairly impressed with the information that's provided and what you will learn from things that you may not know. Some will, some won't.
So just to clarify, just to make sure so we're not we don't get confused, I mean, not necessarily confused, but we don't get some potential competing issues. We're going to go ahead and send information about what meeting dates we want. But also, what I heard from AE, given Vern's very passionate explanation as to why the whole CAC ought to be at the table on this, is that we're also going to look for time on a regular CAC to talk about drainage, which obviously you won't be able to cover in 10 minutes, and we know that. So we'll have to we're proactively trying to look out agendas so that we can build some time for, obviously this is what's happening, we need focus time for some of these big issues. Is that what I'm also hearing?
I feel that is the best balance, and I feel it could be, I would love to see the sources consolidated for digital access as briefing. I think it's important to pay attention to the general discussion of the whole stormwater issue that is out in the neighborhoods with people too. But I think that adds a focus that can happen at this table that the other meetings can build on. So yes.
Okay. Is that what we all heard? All right. Okay. Got it. Tim and I are meeting anyway. Not next week, the week after, we'll go through this because you'll have to need a chunk of time to obviously do this.
Well, because April's running right up on us, we want to get those dates out to people as soon as we can, probably before then.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead. Because you're leaving in a
Okay. We're tag teaming the microphone.
Yeah.
So there was a request for the folks who came in later who didn't introduce themselves behind us. If you could introduce yourselves, that'd be great. Thanks, Liz.
Hi, I'm Angie Lopez with MIG, and Jay Rankins is usually here instead of me, but I'm taking his place tonight.
I'm Sean Walsh with Sean Walsh Consulting.
Mi nombre es Angelina Torres, soy parte de la coalición. Gracias.
My name is Angelina Torres, I'm part of the coalition.
Mi nombre es Raimonda Carrión y también soy parte de la coalición. Gracias.
My name is Raimonda Carrión and I'm also part of the coalition.
Mi nombre es María y también soy parte de la coalición.
My name is Maria and I'm also part of the coalition.
I'm Nola Miguel with the GS Coalition. Thanks.
Okay.
My name is Martin Picard, Guadalajara.
Did we get everybody? I think we did.
Okay, before we move on to the next item, Maria asked me to make an announcement about myself before I have to sneak off. And I apologize for having to leave early. Some of you know that I'm a fully certified police officer in the state. I still serve as a volunteer police officer. I have to go off and go put a uniform on and go do something cop-like. But I have other news to share that Maria thought was important because she's my Cuban godmother. April 2nd, I start a new position. Some of you may or may not know. I'm going to work for DPS, Denver Public Schools, as the new chief, well, the newly created Chief Legal and External Affairs Officer, where I will oversee the legal team, communications team, public affairs team, and crisis management for the district. So just so you know.
Okay.
Your cows know you're not going to have any more time for it?
What's that?
Your cows know you're not going to have any more time?
Well, they're on their way to, they'll be processed soon, so they won't know anything.
All right. So, moving on, I'm going to turn this over to Gretchen to go through the NWC.
Turn it over to Eric's gonna.
Right.
The circle of life is Hakuna Matata.
And actually, this is, Eric's going to kick us off. Hi, Terrence. Eric's going to kick us off.
Okay, I'll kick us off. All right, one of the things I want to do is just make sure everyone understands what the campus placemaking team is doing. This is an exhaustive list, and as I go through this, I need you guys to think about what of these things do you want us to bring to you? Because there's way too much here. We'll be here till the project is done, going through all this stuff. So I'm going to go through each task order, and we can talk kind of talk at the end of this about how we want to go through all this. So task order 1 is the program refinement. The main piece of this is to go through every building and size every room to make sure we have the correct footprint on the ground, okay? So this is office space, closet space, storage space, event space, seating, all those things have to be identified. We're probably 90% through the equestrian center, the livestock center, and the stockyards. Those documents are each 30 pages, 11 by 17 small font, okay? I'm not thinking this group wants to see all that. You probably want to have a summary at the end, but it's a very complex program, okay? So the second piece then is the public space program. This we definitely want to bring to you. We had a meeting on this today. And this is taking the list that Mickey has, all the information from the master plan, the information that we've gathered from interviews with, we call them inputters, with specialists who run these kinds of facilities, from the public meetings. All that stuff's coming together to start the program for the public space. It's a very exhaustive program, and Mickey, you're going to want to see all this. You want to make sure that all those pieces are in there. What we're going to need help with is how do we hone this down we have to design the spaces to be as flexible as possible so that we can have all these events throughout the years. So we can't plan for everything, so we have to plan for some things. And that's where we're gonna bring that draft to you next week to start, or next month to start talking about that, okay? So the public space program is very important. We have a market analysis. That's still in draft form. As soon as that's ready, we will bring that, but that is a campus-wide market analysis. And not only is it what this site can bear for the market, it's also a very detailed list of other events that we can attract here, the amount of people that they attract, and the potential revenue that those bring in. It's pretty interesting stuff, and Paul has been helpful in helping us put all that together. But again, that's a big component of what we have to do, and then we use that to move forward, not only for phases 1 and 2, but for the triangle and the future components on the east side of the tracks. And then the last one is the built form, campus character, and the campus cultural plan. The campus cultural plan is as exhaustive as we can make it. Look at the history of the site, public art, music, what does the West mean for this site? We're trying to bring all those cultural elements together, storytelling, history, interviews with people. How do we then take that information and pull that into the campus so that when this place is designed and built, it has that richness, okay? So that's what the campus cultural plan is. The public meeting that Julie's going to talk about here in a second is April 12th. It's going to focus on that campus cultural plan. So we're going to want input for that. So that's the first task order. They're about 75% done with that task order. There's more programs. So the second one then is infrastructure. They started this in late September. So we already did the site plan refinement, and we're a little behind on schedule because of that site plan refinement, but we have a much better site plan, and we're moving forward with that. So we are about 15% with the overlot grading, and that's to understand how we move earth around, what the final elevations of all the buildings will be. And then also, as part of our work with Central 70, we're getting 200,000 cubic yards of their dirt. And so we're working that for how we can fit that on the site. The rail alignment, the placemaking team is just looking at the right-of-way corridor and basic alignment. We have a consultant, Wilson & Company, who will start in earnest, hopefully by the 13th of April, on the rail design. So this is an initial component that ties the rail grading to the site grading. All the utilities, there are a boatload of both existing utilities and future utilities that we have to do. The biggest one we have to look at first is the big 78-inch storm line that runs through the site. We have to place that, make sure it drains right, and how do we connect all of that. So these utilities are overlot, big scale stuff that we will then give to the horizontal designers who will be on board by May, who will then take those drawings to 100% and then they'll be bid out. Street right-of-ways, we think we're close to finalizing the right-of-way widths. What happens in between those lines, we haven't quite finalized yet. We want to bring that to you and show you what these streets are going to look like. Once we set the right-of-ways, then we can start setting all the legal descriptions for those, and then help us also do legal descriptions for parcels like the CSU parcels. They need to have those identified. So again, it's part of the process. Bridges and catwalks, we're taking all those to 30%. We have the 2 river bridges, and we have the pedestrian bridge that goes over the 3 railroads at the RTD station. So those are all moving forward at this point in time. And then how do those touch down? Where do they connect? How do we get people across them? How do all the trails connect to those, especially the river bridges? Stockyards design 30%. Again, this is one of the first things that has to go, so the placemaking team is taking that design to a 30% level. We have some initial pen layouts, and that pen layout then sets where we put water, electricity, how we grade it, what pens are permanent, what pens are temporary. Again, a lot of stuff. Not sure how much detail you guys want to get into all that. We can certainly provide some of that information, but again, we have a lot to go through. So.
I did just want to point out that we'll make this available so that you don't have to be writing it down, and we can also provide additional detail on these too. It's a lot, but that just shows how complex this single contract is.
Then we also have a traffic study, and that's kind of tied to the right-of-way widths and the street widths. And then the Delgany Interceptor design, we're working with Metro Wastewater to find the best location for where the Delgany can be undergrounded and relocated. Okay, so those are the first 2. All right, task order 3, which will start, I'm hoping, within a week. We're just waiting for the contract to finish. So this is the public realm. This is the kind of the meaty stuff. This is more master plan-like stuff. So we want to start detailing all the character areas. We want to identify the character areas on the campus and what are the critical components that need to be in each one of those. User experience, what's a day in the life here for people that work here, people that visit just for a day, people that are here for the stock show. How do they experience the site? How do they walk through the site? What are the things that they're going to need? So that's a big component of it. Public and private right-of-ways, what are the final components of those right-of-ways? What's the tree spacing? What kind of lighting is it like? What do the sidewalks look like? Again, all those components need to be brought up to a level that we can get them to final designers to finish those, okay? Public space plazas and interface with the facilities. How do all the public spaces tie to the streets? How do they tie to the neighborhoods? How do they tie into every lobby space in the building? So that how people move through the site is intuitive. We have the signage in the right place, all those pieces. So, and then also with the public spaces, what events can happen in those? Doing event tent layouts, and here's a space that this could happen in, or this is a good place for public art, okay? And those are all the things we want to bring to you guys. And so we just haven't gotten there yet, and I know it's tough, so but be patient, but we're getting there, okay? Front of house, back of house. Kind of at the current stock show right now, front of house and back of house are kind of all pretty mixed. The new site's a little bit different. There is really a clear distinction between what happens in the public areas and what happens in the back areas. We have to look at all that, make sure all the truck turning movements work with the back of the house, how we move animals in and out. And then on the front side, how do people still experience some of that? Because it is part of the stock show, all right? And it's part of the events that happen. Pedestrian flow and the multimodal opportunities. So how do people move through the site? How do people go through along Betty Cram Drive and connect from this building, which will still be active when we open phases 1 and 2, to all the buildings on the new side, all right? How do the people connect to Washington Street? How do they connect to Bright Boulevard and then Globeville and Miriam? How do all those pieces work? And then the multimodal component of this is, where do buses stop, all right? What other modes of transportation are coming here? How do we get from the rail to the site? So all those pieces are part of that. Architectural character, we have more on the design standards and guidelines, but we want to start to get an idea for what these buildings are going to look like. These are big buildings. And so we all need to have an input in how we break down that scale and then how do we make them affordable yet comfortable for the site. Signage and wayfinding, a critical piece of this. And so how do we move people through the site? What things are, like the armored water tower, where is that in the site that people can orient on this big campus? So signage and wayfinding is a big piece of this too. Site security overlay, something 20 years ago you probably wouldn't have done. But it's a real critical component. How do all the security components stack up here? Are there places where people can hide? Are there things that we need to then, if we have a catwalk, does that need to be closed during some big events because it's a potential threat? We've got a really good security consultant on board who's going to help us with that, all right? And then those kind of things go to the authority board, and they will have to run the security for this, but it's the overlay for them. And then a zoning review of the zoning, we have to rezone the rest of the site. A portion of it is already zoned, the NWC zoning. We'll have to talk through all of that, but we've got a big portion of the site that still has to be rezoned. We've put that off because we need to own it all first before we do that. And then, of course, all the renderings and graphics and all the pretty pictures, Angie will be busy forever doing all the graphics that we have to do here. But that's, again, the tool that we bring to you so that you can understand what we're trying to create here. And then the campus model, it has been requested that we build a campus model that people can look at and see and touch and feel and see how people walk through the site. And then we're also looking for a design review for the initial structures, and it's a timing thing. We have a new maintenance facility that's an existing building that's going to be the first vertical construction procurement that we put out probably in another month and a half. And so the designers who are going to design that need to know what the design standards are for that building. They need to know what it's supposed to look like and how they plug into that. So we've got that, and then the next one will be the Stockyards Event Center, which is another earlier building before probably we'll have the full design standards and guidelines. Okay. So that's the public realm stuff, and that's the stuff we want to bring to you. But there is hours of work to present to you guys, and we want to make it meaningful for you. And I think, and I mentioned this to Maria just a few minutes ago, it's like, we are going to need other forums than this meeting to keep you guys involved. And if you remember back in the master plan, we had breakout groups. And I know it's another meeting, but again, this is, we can bring you initial stuff to get your input in, but to really delve into the meat, which is what you guys want to do, we're going to have more time. And I know you don't want more meetings, but that's just kind of the way it's going to have to be. So. And then the last task order is the design standards and guidelines. And these are kind of the main components right now that we have. This may grow. So architecture, public space, public and private right-of-way, civic infrastructure, which is all the bridges and structures, signage and wayfinding, lighting, regeneration, sustainability, and historic resources. With the design standards and guidelines, we're also setting up a design review board, and we're in the process working with community planning and development, Brad Buchanan and his staff, to make sure that that design review board is meaningful and can lead the design through all these buildings. So that's the full scope of the MIG's team. Angie's probably cross-eyed back there with all the work that is going on. But they've got a wonderful team, and they have a lot of good staff that really wants to come here and share their ideas with you and get your ideas so that we can really make this a meaningful place.
So what I would, that's the overview we were talking about. As an example now of one of the things I'd actually like to move, there's a couple of slides in between around 4701 that I'd like to come back to, but actually look at the historic resources update and the focus on now one of these, which is the campus cultural plan, as one of those elements coming forward, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I would also ask Maria if we could put a request out to the CAC, to Eric's point, what type of meetings you would like about these. Now that you've got this list, we'll make this available and send it out afterwards. But what type of meetings, how, yeah, it'll be posted. What breakout
It's already
groups?
posted.
It's already posted. But how would you like to interface with this enormous body of work? And we'll make ourselves available.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Julie just for a second. She's going to talk about the upcoming public meeting on the campus cultural plan.
Good evening, everyone. I'll keep this really short. I know we're getting to the end, but I wanted to mention really quickly, I was listening to the feedback earlier that we were talking about the outreach and the outreach approaches. And I think that's fantastic. I love that you guys are digging into this. I love that you guys have opinions. You know, we have a plan. We have tactics laid out for the next 8 months. But, you know, we really see you guys as a resource. So if you have ideas, you have suggestions, you have meetings, you have people you want us to connect with, absolutely bring it on. I know myself, I know Jenna, I know Gretchen and Marcy. I mean, we're all very, very interested, and we see you guys as a resource. So fantastic. Keep bringing those thoughts, and, you know, we'll keep incorporating them as we move forward. So I just had two quick things I wanted to highlight on is part of our outreach and something that was so much fun last week, we were able to build on the great work that CSU has done with Bruce Randolph. It's a middle school and a high school. So last week, the placemaking team, Angie joined me, and we did the two classes. We did a middle school class and we did a junior, they were juniors, I think, so there was a high school class. And we rolled out the master plan and we rolled up our sleeves and we gave them markers and pins and we told them to help us design things, and they gave us all kinds of ideas about how they would want to use areas around the riverfront and different parts of the site. And we've actually taken that information, we've scanned it in, and we're actually using it as some of our, as an input into some of our design work and supporting some of these tasks. So absolutely fantastic experience, and I'm very excited to work with CSU as we continue some of that. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention, you've heard about it a couple of times now, April 12th is our next placemaking community meeting. It's going to be at 5:30 in the Swansea Rec Center, and it is focusing on the cultural plan. It is going to provide information about the data that we has been brought forward so far with our research. We're going to be asking for more feedback. What sort of stories are we missing? What additional things should we be attracting? And we're going to be asking for very specific feedback from the individuals that join us on how now do we take some of these historical items and stories and architectural pieces and materials and actually fold them into the redeveloped site itself. So it's going to be very hands-on, very roll up your sleeves. We'll provide different things for people to react to, but we're also going to be looking for feedback and suggestions. So love your help on getting the word out, and love to have you guys visit it as well on April 12th at 5:30. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Julie?
Yes. So thank you so much for reaching out to the middle and high schoolers. Don't forget about the youngest citizens too. Like as early, you'll hear me say this every time, but include elementary as well as early childhood. And I can send you all a project what happened in Boulder when young children get involved with city planning.
Fantastic. Great point. Any questions?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, before we leave this slide, is there anything that you didn't see here that you think the placemaking team should be looking at? And you don't have to tell me right now, but think about it. This presentation will be on the website.
How are you going to mix the I-70 project, all this, to move it to Bill?
We have a group that's working closely with I-70. Again, we're kind of working with City of Denver Public Works also. And it's mostly coordination and construction traffic, making sure that events can still be accessed at this site. We've already had some run-ins a little bit on some early things. But we meet regularly with the Central 70 team to make sure that those things are as coordinated as possible, and I'm sure there will be more and more meetings as we move forward. All right. Oh, wait, sorry.
Are you doing like an art master plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that's part of the cultural plan. Sorry, didn't talk about it.
So it is part of the cultural plan.
So we have John Grant on our team, and John is helping us put together the arts component. So we have a 1% for art for the project. Sorry, so we have to use the City of Denver process for selecting artists. But the art piece itself is it's a critical component of a cultural plan, because the things that we put in the cultural plan are things that artists are going to look at to get ideas for what art should be here on this campus. Okay, so yes, we'll have that. We'll bring that to you as part of the cultural plan.
Thank you.
And I would just add to that we have the 1% for Art program. I do want to have, and now I'm surprising Eric with this, and I apologize. I do want to have a more robust conversation too about arts and artists on the campus. And I talked to Tracy about that briefly. I've talked to Chandler about that. And perhaps we can form some special work. I think it has to be connected to the authority because it's about that long-term use and operation of the campus. But that's definitely one of the intentions of the master plan coming through. So that's going to be both on the phase 1 and 2 work that the placemaking team does here. And it's also a bigger conversation about the programming and use and activation with the authority. So we need to hit that 2 ways.
Sorry. Vicki?
Do you include in your scope the integration of
community. I didn't see it up here.
Yeah, it's not a specific item, it's kind of wrapped, it's, in the scope, they have a series of overarching elements that they have to kind of bring into every piece. One of those is community integration. Everything we do, we have to think about how this ties to the community. Another one, for instance, is sustainability, all right? We know everything we need to have our regeneration goals met. So rather than having a separate task for that, it's an overarching. So we have a number of those.
It is, but it's also task order 1, step 1, public involvement.
Public involvement, yeah. But that's, the public involvement is a little different than the integration.
Correct, correct.
Yeah. Hey, up here.
Regarding the art, I want to go as a matter of record now with great respect for the River Rhino Art District that the National Western Center is in Elyria, Globeville, and Swansea are 3 neighborhoods, and I want to make sure that we don't accidentally create an overlay that is more an emphasis on an art district identification than a neighborhood, and especially a historical neighborhood. Where there's a tension in the neighborhoods now about this, and I just want to really emphasize that for us to be very mindful as we go forward, that we have the conversation in terms of neighborhood artists and neighborhood, the actual named historic neighborhoods. So I just want to please ask us that we land on that side of the emphasis. Which, by the way, I think Tracy supports. I think Tracy is down with this. So
Better. All right. Anybody else on this? All right. I'm going to turn it over to Gretchen, and we're going to talk about 47-1 Brighton.
Actually, I want to look at the broader
You wanna do
campus
that one
historic
first?
and
All
then
right.
come back
Okay. Now I
to
can
this
see
first
what you're
structure.
saying.
Yeah.
All right. So we have talked a couple times about the historic resources process and kind of the overall strategy. I've handed out to you a map with all the identified eligible historic resources on the site. There are a lot of them, all right? And so what we have done is last week we had a meeting with 30 people, and it was, Andy was there, so we had Historic Denver, History Colorado, Landmark Preservation Commission, CSU, Western Stock Show Association, the city, and our full consultant team to talk through every resource on the campus. No decisions were made, okay? I just want to let you know that. And this is another thing that we're bringing to you in April.
Okay.
But we talked through every resource. So I think there's like 4 ways we can deal with the resources. One is they remain in place, and we will have to figure out a use for those and how we upgrade those facilities to bring them to be active, okay? There's a number of things that stay in place. You know, like the Armor Admin Building and the 1916 Livestock Exchange Building. But there's also some smaller buildings on the site, like McConnell Welding on National Western Drive, that remain. They're great buildings. What happens to those? Okay, so those are the things that stay. The second one is on your map. You'll see a lot of those dots where we're building a new building. Those buildings can't stay. Okay, so how do we document those? What do we salvage off those that can be reused? Could they be moved? So again, we look at all those options, all right? Then the third component are things like the yards. We know the yards have to move because we're putting the new livestock center there, all right? So how do we then salvage all that yard material and reuse that? Where can that be reused? Can that be part of a future public art program, you know? So one of the things we're talking about is we're going to end up having a boneyard on the site of all these cool things that we can reuse and again try to keep some of that history on the site as we redevelop the project, okay? And then the last one is buildings that will just be demolished, and we'll record those either through photography, written narrative, whatever those may be, salvage the important pieces off those we can, and then they just get removed from the site. So I think those were the 4 options that we have with all the historic buildings. And so just this morning I received the draft notes from that meeting. And then we're going to now look at some options for the buildings that either have to move or can stay, how those fit with the site, and then we're going to bring that stuff to you guys and the partners in April to talk about all the historic components, because there's a lot of it, and it's really interesting, and our team Diana Litvak from Mead and Hunt has done all the research into all these buildings and sites. And it's not just buildings, it's also things. The Delgany Interceptor is historic, okay? And we've run into this in the past. If you go to Union Station, they have a plaque about the Delgany Interceptor that they had to cut when they're there. And it's really cool. It's a glass interpretive piece about utilities. Utilities are as historic as the buildings, all right? So we have to look at all of them, the railroads, the streets. So anyway, it's really cool. There's just a lot to look at here because there's so much history here in the site, okay? So that's the resources process that we're doing right now. The next thing is the cataloging of the site. The MIG team has informed us about an app that we're going to use. Is it called Esri? Is that what it is? And we are going to go out on the site probably in April with a herd of people. And with your cell phone and the app, you take a picture and hit the app, and you have options of what this component is. And we're going to document all the historic components on the site. All right. So this is really important for future educational and interpretive components. It's important for the public art group who can look at this catalog and say, oh, this was here, this happened here, those kind of things. So again, it's a pretty in-depth electronic dictionary or encyclopedia of the site, both buildings, rail. So it's even down to like some of the hinges on the gates in the yards are really cool. All right, so how can those be reused? How do we document those? How do we save them? Okay, so that's the catalog. Then all that information, along with the public art master plan, goes into developing the cultural plan. All right, the cultural plan is kind of the reservoir of all this stuff. All right, so we've already got a draft outline for that, and we'll talk about that at the public meeting, and we'll bring some of that information back next week too, or next month too. So plan on a long meeting next month. Maria, sorry. All right. Then we're going to do the landmark application for the Armor Admin Building. That's drafted, and we're ready to look at that, and that'll go to Landmark Preservation Commission to landmark this building on National Western Drive. And then we're also doing structural inspections on the sheet bridge and the Armor Water Tower. All right, those are two structures. The sheet bridge and the water tower both may need to move for different reasons. The water tower definitely has to move because the equestrian center is right on it. So then where does that get relocated? How do you move it? What structure needs to be redone? So this engineering inspection helps us with that. It's not a historic structures assessment, which is what you do with a building. It's more of a different component. So that's what we're doing from a historic standpoint, from the broader standpoint. All right. Any questions on that? Yeah.
Can you comment on, I'm glad Christoph is here from the 40 Transportation Museum, because I'd like you to maybe give us some impressions of how some of the resources there can be folded in. Are you working to locate some that come, are you working to locate
some that might be able to come to the site as part of the inventory of potential installations, and just kind of give us a feel for that?
We are in the process of setting up a meeting to sit down and talk with Christoph and his team about how these two components interrelate on the site. We certainly, while people are here, we certainly also want them to go to the Forney.
Absolutely.
And vice versa, but there also may be shared in things that we either salvage from the site that could go into the Forney, or there may be things that on a temporary basis could be shown here. And it's almost like a temporary public art or a traveling art thing, but it could be that. And we also have those components with Museum of Nature and Science and History Colorado. They also have these depths of things that could be shared back and forth.
And Riverside Cemetery.
And Riverside Cemetery, correct.
So now you're going to move the sheep bridge also?
I don't know about that. The issue with the sheep bridge is that it's in the floodway, okay? And so it's the east bank column that holds it up impedes the water flow down the river. And so we're talking with Urban Waterways about that structure.
So I just wanted to point out that everything that's on this slide is under task order 1, the last bullet, which has the campus cultural plan. So that's the depth of, that's why it's important to show all the tasks, and then this was a deep dive into one portion of it.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, John?
When will the structural inspections take place on the cattle crossing, the sheep crossing?
We're writing the scopes now, and what we haven't determined yet is if we're going to go to try to get grants from History Colorado to do those. So it's a few months out.
You got a ballpark figure as to when it might be completed?
Oh, by the end of the year would be great.
But obviously the tower has priority.
Yes, yeah. Although the Equestrian Center isn't the first thing we're building, but it's darn close. So yeah, we
And it has to be moved.
Yes.
No way you could build around it, like.
No, it would be right in the middle of the horse barn.
A lot of water.
It would be a lot of water.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Anything else on the overall strategy? Okay, now I'm going to turn it back over.
And I just want
Gretchen.
to recognize we're past 7:30, so I will be going quickly, but just stop me if you need me to. I do want to add, one of the agenda items, we talked about a new staff member that's coming on, Sean Snow. He's actually currently a member of History Colorado. He's going to come on to the National Western team at the city in a liaison role. We'll be sharing his time back, but he's going to help us add, as Eric has 5 different elements of work: rail, placemaking, everything in placemaking. He's going to help add some depth to us on the historic side and dive into the campus cultural plan. There's also some other opportunities out here for storytelling that I don't want to lose, both in our communities surrounding the site, things that happened at the site, the relevance of the site to the state. So we'll bring him into a CAC meeting. He hasn't started yet, but when he does, we'll share his scope of work. And really, it's a place where we can give him ideas and help him bring the site to life. And my apologies to History Colorado for bringing him onto our team, though they are not here tonight. So Mark Rodman's already forgiven me. So I did want to talk about 4701 Brighton. This is a building that we've talked about multiple times, and Drew, I want to thank you because you really helped initiate this conversation about what do we do with this really important structure. And we have worked on the historic structures assessment in coordination with History Colorado and Historic Denver, and Annie's here tonight, and John has been a huge part of these discussions. Our original thought was that we could move the building back and relocate it. The cost for that, and we looked 3 different times for movers, was $2 to $3 million. It's a very complicated structure, and the interior of the structure has had at least 1 fire. It's really the exterior of the building that is the significant part of the structural element, and it's really the activities that happened within that building and the site of that at that corner of 47th and Brighton that is also really important. All of the historic partners that have been in conversation with us with our capital build team agreed that $2 to $3 million was, quite frankly, just a hard number to swallow for this. And what we didn't want to do was lose the building. So what we have proposed to proceed with, and we do have, and I apologize, I had thought, Liz and I had a miscommunication. I thought she was forwarding letters to you earlier this week. We have a letter of support from History Colorado, and we issued a letter of what our steps are. These are both posted on the nationalwesterncenter.com website, and Liz can pass them around. So that was a mistake on my part for not having those sent to you this week. What we are proposing is a deconstruction of the building, and if we flip to the next page, you can see what that looks like. So it's removing the non-historic elements and the damaged elements on the interior, doing a measured drawing of the building so that it can be reconstructed in that exact size as a new structure, removing the exterior windows and frames and the doors and frames, deconstructing the brick superstructure, putting that onto pallets, labeling the pallets, storing those in a secure location from the elements, and right now that'll be on the National Western Center campus, and holding the space for that. So the team will not be building anything else at this location, so that our intention is to replace the building, and that would be a new structure that could be programmed for use by the authority, and then wrapping those bricks and those exterior elements that we saved around that new structure. And Denver Landmarks has let us know that if we are able to accomplish this in this way, they would actually be able to land market as a historic structure. So it's not exactly the outcome that we had hoped for. I think on behalf of all the partners, we had really, the goal is to leave structures in place. Then, as Eric walked through, the next best thing is to keep it intact and relocate it in that same vicinity. We ended up at our third option, which is how can we keep this opportunity as a gateway into the campus for community on this eastern edge of the site and in this location. And my hope is that we can work with the authority to find a construction partner, find a programming partner, and make this part of the community use that it had been in the past. So if there are questions about this, please let me know.
Hang on, Drew. So, Gretchen, do you have any plans right now for where to move it? I also heard it might be related to number 17 and 24 on Eric's map here. What's the vision for where to move it? And are there buildings that are moving as well, or are you moving it to existing buildings that will stay?
So that's why I wanted to do the campus cultural and historic map first. Every other structure on the building is going to be addressed through that as a complete whole about the campus. This building in particular, Brighton Boulevard and the amenities there, conflicted with it by 40 feet. That's why we were really hoping we could move it. It's in that construction zone for Brighton Boulevard, and we have until December to open that back up so the stock show can operate. So we were in a real tight time crunch. What we wanted, what the future vision of this and what we have preserved is that corner is for this building, period.
Okay.
Right, so it's not just saving the exterior structure and the windows and the door frames, it's also saving the land that's right there. The importance here is that intersection too, as a use for community, and that's also held.
Gretchen, that's kind of what I was hoping you would say. So probably it will be relocated very close to where
Scooch
it
back.
is.
Yep, it's just,
Okay.
really just moved back.
Okay,
Yeah.
because it does anchor,
Yeah.
and it's very site-specific, and it really
Yeah.
relates to the neighborhood. So I think that's a way of the neighborhood kind of being preserved across Brighton
Yeah.
Boulevard, so we don't have this harsh line
Yeah.
between Elyria and the campus.
Right.
That, okay. And are there some, I guess it's probably, I've heard of buildings being reconstructed before. There's one, the Ghost Building downtown.
Yep, yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah. So
Do
we
as good
call
a
it-
job as
That's
that.
what, 18th and,
Candy. The Rocky Mountain Drive.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Ghost Building was the Rocky Mountain Diner, and it was deconstructed and reconstructed in that location a long time ago, 20, 30 years ago. But I just want to say, I think your question is really good about the location, and we're really appreciative of the work that was done to try to resolve that, because I think this is one of those opportunities, Mickey, where you have the integration of the neighborhood and the campus and a place to really reinforce that connection. And we also really appreciated, and John also couldn't be here tonight, he had an emergency come up, but he has been very active on this, and he was out just this week again with some of the team looking at the adjacent other buildings on Baldwin, and we had the chance to talk through a lot of those last week. And because this part of the campus is in a later phase, some of those decisions aren't as urgent, but we really appreciated the opportunity to sort of talk about this holistically and start thinking about the relationships between these buildings and where there may be clusters. And so I think there was some really good progress made. We didn't answer all the questions, of course, and a lot of decisions will be made in the future, but I think it was a good start to really resolving some of the things that I know we've been wondering about for a few years, and some of you maybe have been too, around what would happen to some of these resources.
So I also want to just add one thing. David Richards is not here tonight. He's the guy who's leading up all this demolition work and how we coordinate all this. But we are going to be doing some selective demolition in the area. We have to get these old garages and sheds and all those pieces in the back of these buildings along Baldwin Court out of there because people are hiding in there. We've got incredible burglary and, the crime that's happening in and around these buildings, and there's so many places to hide. So the main structures themselves are going to remain on Baldwin, but you will see that we will be tearing down some of the old garages and sheds.
we walked through every structure that would be part of that demolition with the historic, it was almost a 4-hour meeting. And we actually made adjustments in that, and there was another site visit to make sure that we're not jumping the gun, that there's nothing we're doing that precludes of that conversation around the campus historic assets.
We don't have to talk about it now, but can you resend or share that list of places based on that analysis that are going to stay and that are going to come down?
Sure.
Yeah, we can do that.
And that'll be the summary next month. We're putting that summary together for the
Yeah.
next month.
Great, sorry.
Yep, we will.
So we'll wait till next month to get that
Yes.
because you're putting
Yes, yes.
the final thing
Yes.
together. Okay.
Well, we're putting a progress thing together.
Anything else on this? Okay?
All right, I've got one
Gretchen?
last item, and we talked about it briefly at the last meeting. It was called the Future Phases 3 through 8, the Triangle, and there's a handout here, and we've got some slides. I do want to preface this with, this was material that in the framework agreement, there is a section of that document called Future Campus Phases that we talked about during one of our 4 sessions with the CAC. And it is a commitment by the partners, it was a commitment by the partners to explore what do we do to complete the campus? How do we bring additional funding to this? As you know, our capital stack, our dollars for phases 1 and 2 includes all of the 2C funding that was approved by voters, the Regional Tourism Act funding, the contribution from the National Western Stock Show, and CSU. So we are starting with phases 3 through 8 with the need to identify funding and partners. We also really need to get the stock show into a sustainable operating model. They need an arena and expo hall to make their business plan complete and sustainable for the next 100 years. And it's very clearly stated by them in meetings and in the document, and something that the city takes the lead on with the authority. We have a period of time to accomplish this. We're well within that time, and they also can come forward with a proposal if we're unable to figure it out. But this document you have in front of you, the first page with the boxes and the timeline is really a summary of the roles and responsibilities of the parties that signed the framework agreement. It shows the city as the principal land and building owner. It shows the national...
Sorry, none of us have that.
Oh, Jenna, do we have more of those?
It's not up there, so we can't see what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, and we can...
They just brought that tonight. I mean, do you have
Yeah,
it?
it's, you know what, it's also part of the slides that we're going to post, so I apologize. I was going off of the handout, and why don't I go off of the slides?
Yeah, the slides are
But-
posted already.
She's got quite a few. Okay, so I'll keep going here and we'll pass them out. My apologies. So it talks about the roles of the partners, and it gives a very brief timeline. This side is really meant for someone who is not as familiar with this project, perhaps not in Denver, not in Colorado, someone that is seeing this for the first time and trying to figure out how we're organized from a governance perspective. So it talks about the city, the authority, talks about the 100-year lease between the city and the authority, and then the lease between the authority and the National Western, and Colorado State University as an independent parcel owner. So there should be nothing new on that side. The slides now as we go forward talk about the triangle as a call to trailblazers in ag, water, and food science research. So it's really thinking through who's already committed to the campus as a user, and the primary users at this point are Colorado State University, Denver Water, a lot of the next generation agribusiness work that they have already done, and obviously the National Western Stock Show. If we go to the next slide, that's the roles and responsibilities that we talked about in the front of the handout. And the next slide is the back side of this. You can see there's a reason we called it the triangle. It's not very creative, but saying phases 3 through 8 gets complicated for folks that aren't familiar with what we've done to date. And it shows what's the remainder of the campus is generally that diagonal along the rail line, and including the Coliseum site south of the highway. We know some things that are called out specifically in the master plan, and that's a 10,000-seat arena, a redeveloped 1909 building is the stadium arena, the historic building, new expo hall, and supporting structured parking from some of the studies we've done, and we've talked about at our last meeting. That parking study's posted on our website. It also talks about the parcel reserved for the funded CSU Center. And we believe that if you had 60 acres approximately in this remaining amount of campus to be developed, that those 4 assets would take about 18 acres. And that leaves 42 acres for the next part of the discussion, which has not started yet. This is all of the material the summarized here that we have. There are no, I just want to be really clear about this up front. There's no development proposal in front of the city or in front of the authority. There are some general market sounding meetings, which are part of the framework agreement that we meet with industry. I think, Maria, the phrase was ongoing and regular meetings, so we've had several. And this is the exact material that we've been sharing. We shared this at our City Council Committee meeting on Tuesday. Some of the placemaking work that you saw Eric present talked about a market demand analysis. And the areas generally of use they're looking at are retail, hospitality, office, and housing. As you would build an arena, the Coliseum site, that building would be decommissioned. It would not be used for programming anymore. The programming would move to the arena. There is no map of where these uses go. There is no number of units of housing and affordable units. Those will all be parts of a discussion, just like when we had the master plan in phases 1 and 2, a very public discussion. There is a lot loaded in there of what the possibilities for the remainder of this campus can be. This is our stopping point right now. We need to allow the market study with HRNA and the campus placemaking to be completed and be brought to you. When we do engage this, there's going to be a huge conversation about affordable housing in the remainder of this campus because of the need, not just in North Denver, but in Denver and in this region. None of those conversations have started yet, so we are not out in front of it and bringing it to you after the fact. In fact, we've got no way to accept an unsolicited proposal from any builder. We're on hold. This is all the information that we have. It's just such a sensitive topic that I wanted to make sure we were bringing it to you as soon as we were having any conversations with industry. If you go to the next slide, these are the same figures from the SAG study that's on our website and some early figures we're getting from the HRNA study as a part of placemaking. It's looking at the entire campus and what the market would want to build here generally in terms of square feet, in terms of what that would cost per square foot. We've done some comparable looks at other arenas and expo halls, generally speaking, and these are all estimates. That's the cost per square foot of a new arena, so you can build out to a very high level estimated total. But it does give you an order of magnitude of the number of square feet that could be available for some future project, and the order of magnitude on the cost for that. It's about $500 to $650 million. And as a reminder, phases 1 and 2 are $765 million for that construction across 7 years. So you really have a similarly sized program. What this looks like and where these uses go, there's nothing beyond this chart and that gray triangle. That's it, because it has to be a conversation that's both about the campus and the partners and about the community and about Denver. So I just did not want to, I don't want to leave the impression that now we're going to jump off from here and bring you a bunch of proposals next month. That is not happening. My hunch is, because Denver as a city has some work to do with its performance-based infrastructure office, and there have been city council meetings, that's another name for P3, PBI, performance-based infrastructure, that if something like this were to go forward, we would need to have that office to support us. It would be, it's months and months and months of discussion, and we're, quite frankly, we need to do a little bit more work on phases 1 and 2, as you saw, before we're really ready to engage this. However, the one piece of this that I would like to bring next month, if you look on the bottom of the handout, there's a purple box that's got a section that says "Dot Solutions." It says development, energy, telecom, digital signage, and food and beverage. The development piece is what you're seeing above and what we're talking about here. It's the construction of these assets and then the potential for co-development. Energy is the next one, and all of these boxes have a trade-off between what you build on the campus and how it's used. So for example, as a construction team, we need to know if we are building net zero district energy on this campus, or if we're building traditional energy grid delivery. It has to time with when and how we put the pipes in the ground, and when you saw Eric present the infrastructure design going forward from placemaking, 30% of utilities and roads, this is a decision they need to be able to run their design. The city has reached out to industry just for information on RFI. Sun Valley has also taken a similar step. There is a market out there now, we believe, for energy, and I think this will be discussed next week with the authority board, and if they are supportive, we would come back and propose a request for proposals for a district energy system using thermal heat from the Delgany Interceptor. So let's call that shower water, just for this meeting, but the power of that hot liquid going through the Delgany Interceptor has the ability to provide a significant amount of energy to the campus, but we would have to put a district energy system and a central utility plant in the plan now to be able to make it happen. So we've got a narrow window here to catch this. And we didn't expect industry to come back. We asked for information. They gave us like tons of information, free information. Some of it proprietary, because there are teams ready to do this. There were at least 7 teams, highly financed, ready to enter into an operating and maintenance agreement, and then they would provide the upfront construction. And it would be an alternative to traditional energy, and it would all be sourced on the campus. The other, besides thermal, it's solar. What's the opportunity for solar? And then we need to understand how that works with the green roofs ordinance too. But solar and thermal seem to be the things that are coming up here. To the amount that this site could actually be a battery. We might produce too much energy if we're able to procure it, find the team, and design it. It's a really tight stretch to get this through. So I would like to ask for time, and it's for the city, we're on a tight timeline to capitalize on this. So we're talking to the authority next week. We would like to come in April and present this, and I know there's a lot of agenda items, but this is one that I would ask for ahead of a lot of the other work that we're doing to see what we can do with this opportunity.
On this specific point, I'd like to ask you to comment on where the National Renewable Energy Laboratory comes in on this as a possible engagement point. And secondly, I'd like to ask our authority board members to broach the possibility of a solar generating relationship with the surrounding 3 neighborhoods, because there are technologies to do solar farms, there are possible revenue sharing things here, and I really feel like we need to talk about this now, because we have some infrastructure issues, policy issues, zoning issues, and some other things that it can also affect some of what can happen in the community investment plan. We could make us self-sufficient. We can extend that net zero into these neighborhoods. There's phenomenal things available. So I'd like that to be folded in as a part of the strategic conversation.
Well, the NREL discussion, National Renewable Energy Lab, has been an advisor on the program for the last 4 years. So they've been part of this team the
So
entire
that's why I
time.
want to call it out,
Yeah.
because I think it's huge, especially because it's being wrecked on the federal level.
Right.
And I think we need the advocacy, but I think we need more people. The more we understand, it's a phenomenal resource.
Yeah.
And it's a leveraging resource. It's the kind of thing that can really help the finances of this. So
I'll
anyway.
hand the mic over to...
What time frame are you talking
That's what we're trying to figure
Yesterday.
out. Yesterday. We know that, we know the deadlines for horizontal construction. We've been mapping that out since we finalized the site plan, which we shared with you. Sam Stevens is the woman on our team who's been at these meetings. She's British. She's the only British person on our team. She's giving us those timelines, and we're working backwards. And what we'll end up doing, if we get the authorities' support for this and the city's support for this, we will end up having to run concurrent design and take a small risk that that's what's going to materialize. We might have to dual design for both outcomes for a period of time, just not to lose the opportunity. So it is now the time to take advantage of this. So we're running an energy model to help inform hopeful procurement. We're running a financial model with some of the expertise from the Jacobs program team. We've just brought in a couple of subject matter experts. We're happy to share all that with you. We're about to see a final draft of the energy model. It's fascinating how this could be distributed to most of the buildings on the campus. Oh.
Questions?
AE had a question for the authority board members.
I think you got it. Did you get it? I'll review. I stated what I was asking.
Oh.
Yeah, well, basically, there is technology that, I don't want us to take time now, but there is technology that can help neighborhoods generate solar technology, et cetera. There's ways we can extend the power grid, and I'm not saying it's realistic, but I think it can be explored. We have a precedent here in another neighborhood in Denver. There's conversation of these going on with the Sustainability Advisory Group too, so I think it's something to put on the table.
Yeah, no, and I really,
It's late, so.
yeah, no, I want to say I appreciate AE and any other ideas that folks have, even though we don't have a solidified community benefits agreement. We are actively thinking about and encouraging folks to come to us with ideas about what can we include in contracts, what can we suggest to the rest of the authority members that we can do now before we have, you know, a document finalized, which could take us a while. So I just wanted to say that.
Any other questions on this issue for Gretchen? Yep, Nola?
I don't understand how the energy thing is related to the triangle. Or are they related?
Yeah.
So they, essentially, we got as far as we can on the triangle we're holding. Energy is going to go in front of it. So in order of precedence, we're prioritizing energy right now as a team. So it also, the setup for energy impacts not just phase 1 and 2 development and the site plan we've been looking at, it impacts the triangle. How you set up energy at the start would be important to know as we go forward with any future phases. So we're catching up on phases 1 and 2. And we have to beat that construction timeline. We would want to know the solution on energy before we would go forward with the triangle. So I probably should have had this conversation on energy happened this week with the city team. That's why I don't have materials prepared and I need to bring them next week. We're developing materials now and trying to catch up with it. So I had the materials prepared on the triangle. We've had that publicly. Usually we bring it here first and then we bring it to council committee. That would have happened, but we changed the order of this meeting from next week to this week. So we wanted to share that material. And they're connected in that energy supplies the entire campus. So we have to stop for a second, figure out our energy story before we do anything else on phases 1 and 2 around the triangle.
But it's not facilities located in that area necessarily?
No. What would happen is we would need to hook a, and I'm learning this and this is not my area of expertise and those folks aren't here. The central utility plant would need to be next to the Belgany interceptor. So it's likely just south of the CSU Water Resources Center. That's a likely site for it where it's in its existing place. Eric said we're trying to figure out how to locate it away from the river, but you'd hook in there and then you'd feed a network up to the buildings north of that, which is phases 1 and 2. Once you know where that is, as we have a triangle discussion, you talk about bringing it across then to phases 3 through 8 or that triangle future phase development.
Okay, sorry, can I just follow up? Oh, yeah. So my concern, the energy thing sounds great. My concern, and I think it needs to be part of the community benefits agreement discussion, is that this triangle is where we lost all of the homes and all of the food outlets and all of the things that were benefits to the community. And if we're waiting 10 more years before anything comes in there, is there any type of temporary plan for the deadness that it is right now?
So I hope no one got the impression that we're waiting 10 years. That's the framework agreement limit by which we have to solve this. We need to figure out energy and then we will continue the discussion with the triangle. So I think that's in 2019, end of 18, that we'll come back to it. I set that messaging about just a pause because I just didn't want anyone to think that there's something that we have that we're not sharing. There are no proposals out yet. The work that's ongoing that we've presented here a couple of times is on the 1909 Stadium Arena or the 1909 Historic Building. So that work is kicking off now. That's fundamental to the food conversation and the community uses at the center of the campus. So that's both a structural assessment and a market study on how you could bring a public market and affordable fresh food to the campus. So that would be part of the future development, and it's one of the reasons to expedite this conversation.
Drew?
So just to sort of pick up on what I think Nola was referring to, is you have about 60 acres in the city that, well, I guess, why would it just sit there for 10 years? I mean, you're still doing horizontal stuff, even if you do the energy system. So there may be needs that could be addressed.
It's important to note that it's not dormant. It's used by the stock show for all of the events. All of the current programming happens there until there's some
Put the triangle picture up.
So the buildings remain in place, I guess.
Yeah, so the stock show's using the Coliseum, Arts and Venues is using the Coliseum.
Yeah, Paul's left, so let me get a little bit more clarification on this, Nola, because we can't wait 10 years.
No one said we're doing this in 10 years.
I know, I understand.
That's
It
not
is
a
a
real
discussion
thing.
that happened during the framework agreement because the stock show, quite honestly, wanted a dead guarantee that the entire campus would be finished and built out. The city told us they could not do that because you can't commit future mayors, future city councils in order to do that. So we compromised on this language to be able to do that, but at least from the stock show perspective, it is as much of a priority as anything else. The problem is that until the new arena gets built, we can't decommission the Coliseum because that's where the bulk of our money is and that's where the rodeo is. So we have to go from one new facility to another facility. So you can't decommission the Coliseum until the new arena is built.
And furthermore, there's a waterfall of uses, so we need to finish the livestock and equestrian buildings so that then you can't have a year without the stock show. Some of those uses then can move up to those large structures as you would begin work on future phases. But it takes a couple of years to line up something of that size, as we saw with phases 1 and 2. So we do need to start the conversation now. So that part of the campus is still active. It looks, for most folks coming to the stock show, and we're doing construction on the back half of the site. If they weren't going to the yards regularly, they're going to go to the same facilities they've been going to. When those facilities come up and they are now activated and programmed and booked by the authority, then the authority is going to need to accommodate some of those annual uses as you would begin any future phases of construction. So, we're hard at work on it. And the energy conversation, for us to meet the timelines, we need to do this in 2018. So this is not a multi-year energy conversation. There is a window for horizontal construction at a 4% escalation rate on cost. And that timeline gets us in 2018 to actually build into the design and begin the construction on these horizontal facilities, including what could be district energy. So, it's a confusing thing to talk about something that shows 42 acres available for development. And then I think it's going to be great to actually take a deep breath around this and figure out how we want to structure the community conversation. So while we're doing energy, that would be a great discussion to have, is how does the CAC want to engage on that? As we're asking you for the placemaking work too on phases 1 and 2, it's an enormous time commitment, and what's the priority of this group on the amount of information we bring you and how much time that will take? Because we're willing to do it, but you're already volunteering a lot of time to be here year over year.
Liliana?
If I want to try and clarify perhaps what you're asking, Lola, I think understanding sort of all the moving parts in the building and all of those, what is the authority and all the other folks involved doing to address the needs of the community now? I think particularly given that we've taken 2
especially because we've taken 2 grocery options out of that side of the neighborhood, taking away Lurangense and 7-Eleven. Is that part of what
Yeah,
you're
can there
asking?
be a temporary plan? And so, I mean, I don't know what the timeline is to replace this stuff, not the big buildings, the stuff right that's at the edge of the neighborhood, that's in that intersection, that's the gateway to Illyria, you know? Is there can we do anything to reactivate that area? Because all we have right now is Starbucks. You know, and that's not a great neighborhood asset. So,
Can I,
Go ahead.
so,
Let's figure that out. We're gonna we need to work on the campus cultural plan, but you're right, there are gonna be buildings on this campus that aren't activated. So it's not related to the triangle, it's about the historic assets that end up being saved, which right now we would then work together, and we'd work with the NDCC and the city and the OED team to look for a funding partner and a programming partner. And we would do that both as a city now and an authority, because they ultimately hold the long-term possibilities. So I think that's something we need to talk about, not just for arts, but for food. How do we make this as even in an interim use or as a permanent use? How do we activate the campus as soon as possible? So that's a really fair point. I would like to spend another, I'd like to understand from the cultural plan what those buildings are. And then we could have some kind of partnership discussion. We're going to need help finding folks to come in, but we do need to do that with the authority.
The building on the southeast corner across from Starbucks, as I understand it, there were some conversations inside the city about that possibly becoming a grocery store. And I don't, it's for lease right now. And I was told by a reliable source, you know, I don't know if I should name him, but but that was a real possibility. And if it isn't under conversation, I'd say, let's put that on the table, although that might be outside the realm of the National Western Center. But we need to act in consort as a neighborhood as a whole, too, with all of our officials. And that building is available.
Yeah, so this is where I look to the NDCC. I don't have any information about that, but Tim, do you know about that discussion?
It's Leo's garage.
Yeah, it used to be Fred.
Not in the offhand that I can.
okay. Yeah, I just don't know.
Well,
I thought Starbucks was I thought Starbucks was moving. Yeah, I don't really want to get into that. I don't know. I'm so tired.
Okay. All right, I was just, anything else? Any on this topic? Okay. Any additional public comment? Anybody in the audience want to weigh in? Nola, anything else? Okay. All right, so guys, we will see you the last Thursday of April.